Before you decide that cucumber plant is finished, give me the next few minutes, because there is a very good chance it is not. If the leaves are dusted with something white and powdery, if the vines are yellowing and drooping even though you soaked that bed only yesterday, if a plant that looked perfectly fine on Monday is folding in on itself by Thursday, then set down whatever is in your hands and stay with me, because that plant is not dead. It is dying, and those are two very different things. The distance between losing it and saving it comes down almost entirely to what you do in the next 48 hours. Here is what almost nobody tells you about this exact stretch of the year. In late July and early August, cucumber plants across the country start dying in enormous numbers, and they do not go quietly over a month. They hold on, and then they seem to collapse all at once. One day the plant is still handing you cucumbers. 2 days later the leaves are pale and spotted. By the weekend, the whole thing is a browning, wilting heap, and the gardener stares at it, decides the season is over, and yanks it out of the ground. And here is the heartbreak in that. Most of those plants could have been saved. I have brought vines back that looked completely gone, white-coated leaves, yellowing from the bottom, vines drooping to the soil, and inside of 2 weeks they were green, firm, and setting fruit again, right through to the first frost. So I promise you this. By the end of this video, you will be able to walk up to a struggling cucumber plant, read it like a page of print, name exactly what is wrong, and know precisely what to do about it today. But before any of that, I have to tell you about the one mistake that costs more gardeners their plants than any disease ever will. It is the mistake that lives at the heart of almost every rescue video out there, and it is the reason so many people follow good advice and still lose the plant. The mistake is this: they reach for a spray before they know what they are spraying for. And in late summer, treating the wrong problem is the single fastest way to burn through the little time your plant has left. Because there is not one thing killing cucumbers right now. There are four completely different killers, and every one of them wears a different disguise, and every one of them needs a different fix. Treat a plant for the wrong one, and you can do everything right and still watch it die. So today, we are not going to guess. We are going to do this the way a good emergency room does it, the way a plant clinic does it. We diagnose first, and we treat second. That order is not a small detail. It is the whole game. Quick thing before we go further, and I will keep it to 10 seconds. If you want gardening that actually holds up in a real backyard, with real dirt and real weather, not the tidy theory you get everywhere else, subscribe and tap the little bell. It is free, it costs you 1 second, and it means the next rescue like this one lands in front of you before your plants ever need it. There are thousands of gardeners already here. Come stand with us. All right. Picture an emergency room for a moment. When a patient comes through the doors in trouble, the first person who sees them does not start handing out medicine. They read the vital signs. They figure out what is actually wrong. Because the wrong treatment on the right patient is still the wrong treatment. We are going to do exactly that with your plant. And the wonderful thing, the thing that makes this so much easier than it looks, is that each of these 4 killers leaves one clear sign. One vital sign you can read with your own 2 eyes in about a minute. So walk out to your plants with me, look closely, and match what you see as I describe each one. The first killer is powdery mildew, and right now, in this weather, it is absolutely everywhere. Go to the older, lower leaves first, the ones down near the base that have been on the plant the longest. Do you see white or pale gray patches that look like someone brushed flour across the surface? Touch one, and it smears under your finger like dust. That is powdery mildew, and it is the most common cucumber problem in existence at this time of year. Now here is why it is so dangerous, because it is easy to look at a little white dusting and think it is only cosmetic. It is not. That white coating physically seals the surface of the leaf so it can no longer gather sunlight. And sunlight is everything to a plant. Sunlight is how it makes every ounce of energy it has. The energy to grow, to hold itself up, to ripen a single cucumber. So as that white film spreads from leaf to leaf, the plant is being quietly starved of the only fuel it knows how to make. Left completely alone, powdery mildew can take a full, healthy vine all the way to dead in about 2 weeks. The second killer gets mistaken for the first one constantly, and that mistake is expensive because the two need completely different treatments. This one is downy mildew, And despite the similar name, it looks nothing like white powder. Look at the top surface of the leaves this time. Do you see angular yellow patches, boxed in and squared off by the little veins of the leaf, so they look almost like yellow tiles set into a grid? That squared off, tile-like shape is the giveaway, because the disease cannot cross the larger veins, so it spreads in these sharp geometric blocks. Now turn one of those leaves over and look at the underside, right beneath the yellow tiles. Is there a fine, grayish-purple fuzz down there, like a faint bruise-colored mold? That is downy mildew showing itself, and I want you to take it seriously, because it is faster and more ruthless than powdery mildew. Powdery mildew takes weeks. Downy mildew can strip a plant to bare stems in a matter of days. And hold this one in the back of your mind, because later in this video, I am going to tell you something about downy mildew that overturns almost everything people believe about how to stop it. It is the single most surprising thing I know about cucumbers, and it is going to change how you garden. The third killer is the quiet one, the heartbreaker, because the plant looks absolutely perfect right up until the moment it doesn't. This is bacterial wilt. Here is the tell, and once you know it, you will never miss it. Is your plant wilting in the heat of the day, drooping and sagging like it is dying of thirst, but when you push a finger down into the soil is actually moist? You water it, and it does not help. And does it perk up a little overnight, only to wilt worse the next afternoon, and worse the day after that, until whole vines simply lie down and give up? That worsening, day-by-day pattern, wilting in moist soil, is the signature of bacterial wilt. And here is what is going on inside. Bacterial wilt is an infection that clogs the plant's internal plumbing, the tiny vessels that carry water up from the roots to the leaves. So it does not matter how much you water. It does not matter how kind you are to it. The water physically cannot climb the stem anymore because the pipes are blocked from the inside. There is a test for this, and it is the most satisfying, most useful 10 seconds in all of vegetable gardening. Take clean snips and cut clean through a wilted stem, low, near the base. Now touch the two freshly cut ends together for just a second, and then slowly, gently, draw them apart. If a sticky, stringy, white thread stretches between them as they separate, like a strand of glue pulling into a line, you have your confirmation. That thread is the bacteria itself, oozing out of the clogged vessels. Nothing else in the cucumber world does that. If you see the string, it is bacterial wilt, full stop. The fourth killer is not a disease at all, and it is the one nearly every tired plant is carrying underneath everything else. It is plain exhaustion. It is the pileup of heat stress, uneven watering, and a soil that has simply run out of groceries after months of feeding a hungry vine. This is the plant that just looks worn out all over. Not white, not tiled, not suddenly collapsing, just faded, yellowing gently from the oldest leaves upward, the fruit slowing down to almost nothing. It is not infected with anything. It has simply poured every last bit of itself into a whole season of climbing and flowering and fruiting, and now the tank is empty and the pantry is bare. And here is the part I love, the part that should give you hope. Of all four killers, this one is very often the most rescuable. A starving plant that gets fed comes roaring back faster than you would believe. Now, before we treat a single thing, I have to give you one more diagnostic skill, because this is exactly where most people take a wrong turn. They look at a struggling plant, they see yellow leaves, and they think, there it is, that is the diagnosis. But yellow is not a diagnosis. Yellow is a symptom, and it shows up in almost all four of these killers. The secret is that the pattern of the yellow tells you the cause, so read the yellow. If it comes in as a fine, speckled mosaic, green and yellow mottled together, and the leaves look crinkled or distorted or puckered, you may be looking at a virus, and viruses are usually carried in by aphids. The move there is to knock back the aphids fast and pull the worst leaves. If the yellow starts at the outer edges of the leaves and creeps inward, while the whole plant just looks tired and washed out, that is the exhaustion and the empty soil talking. If the yellow shows up in those sharp, angular tiles boxed in by the veins, that is downy mildew tipping its hand before you even flip the leaf. And if the lowest leaves yellow first while a white dust creeps across them, that is powdery mildew arriving hand in hand with plain old age. Read the pattern, and a confusing yellow mess turns into a clear name. And a clear name, as you are about to see, is more than half the cure. One more thing to understand before we start, because it explains why all of this is landing on you right now, in these particular 2 weeks, and not in June. Everything that threatens a cucumber peaks at the very same moment in late summer. The humidity that fungus adores is at its height. The heat is relentless. The soil is at its most drained after months of feeding. The insects that were a handful in June have had 2 months to breed into a crowd. And the plant itself is at its most tired. Every one of those pressures crests in the same short window. That is why a plant that looked healthy on the weekend seems to fall apart by Wednesday. It was never overnight. It was months of quiet pressure breaking through all at once. And it means your rescue almost always has to answer more than one problem at the same time, which is why we finish with a routine that covers all of them. So let's start saving plants, beginning with powdery mildew, because that white dusting is what most of you are staring at right now. Step 1. Prune out the worst of it, and do it today. Clean scissors or snips, and take off every leaf that is heavily coated in white. Do not be shy, and do not feel cruel doing it. A leaf that is more white than green is not helping the plant at all anymore. It has become a little factory, pumping fresh spores out onto every healthy leaf around it. Taking it off is mercy, not harm. But when you carry those leaves away, do not toss them on the compost pile, because the spores will simply overwinter there and ride right back to you next summer. Bag them and put them in the trash. And one firm limit as you prune, never take more than about 1/3 of the plant in a single day, or you will send the whole thing into shock and undo your own good work. Step 2. Open the plant up. Reach into that crowded, congested center and thin it out so that air can move straight through the plant instead of sitting trapped inside it. This matters more than almost anyone realizes, because mildew is a creature of still, stagnant, humid air pooled in the heart of a dense tangle of leaves. Open the plant so a breeze can pass through, and you make the whole environment hostile to the fungus. Step 3 is the spray, and here is where I am going to walk away from almost every other rescue video you have ever watched. Every single one of them tells you the same thing. Mix up baking soda and spray it on. And I need you to really hear this next part, because the people who grow cucumbers seriously, the ones who have tested this, quietly stopped doing that years ago. Here is why. Baking soda is sodium bicarbonate. On its own, the research shows it is not actually very effective against mildew. And worse, every time you spray it, you are leaving sodium behind, on the leaves and down in the soil. Over a season, that sodium builds up, it shoulders calcium and magnesium out of the way, and it slowly degrades the very soil you are working so hard to keep healthy. The plant scientists behind Washington State University's garden professors have been trying to get this word out for years, and it just never quite reaches the backyard. So here is the upgrade, the move that almost nobody at the home garden level ever makes. You keep the exact same idea, but you swap the sodium for potassium. Potassium bicarbonate works in precisely the same way. It shifts the surface of the leaf to a pH that the fungus simply cannot survive on. But instead of dumping harmful sodium onto your plant, it leaves behind potassium, which your cucumber actually wants and uses. And it does one thing baking soda cannot do at all. It knocks out mildew that is already there, not just the mildew that hasn't shown up yet. You will find it on the shelf sold as Green Cure or Millstop or Caligreen, and it is fully approved for organic growing. Same bottle, same effort, same few dollars, and a genuinely better result with none of the long-term cost to your soil. If you take one single thing from this whole video, let it be this quiet little swap. And if you would rather reach into the refrigerator, there is real science behind the milk spray too. But the recipe you have almost certainly heard is wrong, and being wrong actually hurts you here. A researcher named Bacterial, working at Embrapa, the national agricultural research body in Brazil, ran the real trials on this back in the late 1990s. What he found was remarkable. A weekly spray of milk at just 10%, and that is 1 part milk to 9 parts plain water, cut the severity of powdery mildew by around 90%, 10%, 1 to 9. Now compare that to what the videos tell you, which is usually 1 part milk to 2 parts water. That is more than 3 times too strong. And it is not harmless to overdo, because Bacterial found that once you push past about 30%, you actually grow a harmless but genuinely ugly film on the leaves. So do not drown your plants in milk. 10%, once a week, early in the morning. That is the number that was actually tested, and that is the number that works. Do those 3 things for powdery mildew. Prune the worst, open the plant up, and spray the smart version, and a plant that looked doomed will very often stop its slide within days and start pushing clean, new, green growth inside a week or 2. Now Downy mildew, and with this one you move faster, because it moves faster than you do. The steps rhyme with powdery mildew, but they are more urgent. Strip off every affected leaf right away, the yellow-tiled ones with the fuzzy purple undersides, and bag them, never compost. Open the airflow hard, because this disease lives and dies on moisture and stagnant air. And here, your baking soda and your milk will let you down, so do not lean on them. For Downy mildew, a copper-based fungicide is your most reliable choice, and copper is accepted in organic gardening when it is used correctly. Coat both the tops and the undersides of the leaves thoroughly and reapply after any rain washes it off. Now, a word of care, because this is a real fungicide, not a kitchen scrap. Follow the label, wear gloves, and do not overdo it, because copper does accumulate in the soil over the years. Respect it, and it will serve you well. The most important move with Downy mildew, though, costs you nothing at all. Water only at the base of the plant, never over the top, and always in the morning, so that any drop that does splash a leaf dries off fast in the sun. Wet leaves sitting through a warm, humid night are the exact open door this disease walks through. Close that door, and you have done more than any spray can do. Now bacterial wilt, and here I am going to be completely straight with you, because honesty serves you far better than false hope ever could. If a vine is fully wilted and you got that stringy white ooze on the stem test, I have to tell you, that particular vine is gone. The bacteria have plugged its plumbing permanently, and there is no spray on this earth that can reach up inside a stem to unclog it. I am not going to sell you a cure that does not exist. But, and this is a big but, gone does not mean the whole plant is lost. If only 1 or 2 vines are affected, cut those infected vines off completely, below the wilted section, and carry them right out of the garden. The other vines, the ones that are still firm and standing and green, can very often keep growing and producing as if nothing happened. Here is the thing you have to understand, though. The real problem with bacterial wilt was never about finding the right spray. There is no spray. The whole story is the cucumber beetle, that small, striped or spotted, yellow and black beetle that chews on your plants and injects the bacteria right into the wound as it feeds. The beetle is the carrier. Stop the beetle, and you stop the disease at its source. So for every plant you still have standing, go after those beetles, and do it in the evening after the bees have gone home for the night so you protect your pollinators. Spray both sides of the leaves with a mix of neem oil and a little soap. Set out yellow sticky traps, because these beetles are pulled toward yellow like almost nothing else. And hold on, because in just a minute, I am going to show you a way to stop those beetles before they ever reach your plant at all, a method that farms in New England have quietly used for years. But first, I owe you that surprise about Downy mildew, and it is a big one, because here is the thing about Downy mildew that changes absolutely everything. It does not survive the winter in your garden. In most of this country, it simply cannot live through the cold, not without a living plant to hide inside. So it does something almost unbelievable. Every single year, it starts over, way down in the warm south, and it rides the wind north. Clouds of spores travel hundreds of miles on the moving air, and they drop down into gardens that have never once seen the disease, sometimes overnight, right after a summer storm blows through. That should sound frightening, and for a long time, it truly was. Let me tell you the story that every serious cucumber grower in America knows. Back in 2004, a new and aggressive strain of Downy mildew broke out in North Carolina and swept up the entire eastern United States. And it did something devastating. It overran a natural resistance that had quietly protected American cucumbers for decades, a resistance growers had leaned on so long they had almost forgotten it was there. Fields from Florida all the way north were abandoned before harvest. It stunned the whole industry, and it caught the experts flat-footed. But here is the beautiful thing that grew out of that disaster, and I would bet almost nothing that you have never heard of it, even though it was built for exactly you. A plant pathologist named Dr. Lina Casada Ocampo at North Carolina State University, along with colleagues like Dr. Anthony Keenath at Clemson, helps run a national tracking network for this exact disease. Every confirmed outbreak in the country, on any cucurbit, gets reported into it, and it maps the disease as it marches north across the season. And now here is the part that is meant for you, sitting in your own backyard. You can sign up for that network, for free, and you can get an alert by text message, by email, or by phone call, the very moment Downy mildew is confirmed anywhere near you. Let that sink in. You can know it is coming days before it arrives at your fence. You can have the copper already on the shelf, the plants already spaced and trellised and drying fast before the first spore ever touches a leaf. Nobody is trying to sell this to you. It is a public system, paid for and built by researchers, sitting there quietly waiting for gardeners to actually use it. And almost none of them do, simply because almost none of them know it exists. And speaking of doing the work before the trouble arrives, I have gathered everything in this video, all 4 diagnoses, every recipe with the exact measurements, the copper cautions, the milk ratio, and the full prevention schedule into a single free printed blueprint you can keep right by the back door. Just scan the little code on your screen, and it downloads straight to your phone. No cost, no sign up, nothing to buy. Print it out, tape it inside the shed door, and the next time a plant starts to slip, you will not be standing there scrambling and second-guessing. Every diagnosis and every fix will be right there in your hand where you need it. It is my gift to you for spending this time in the garden with me. Now, back to that beetle, because I promised you a way to stop it cold, and this one is genuinely clever and almost laughably cheap. It is called perimeter trap cropping, and it was worked out by real researchers, people like Ruth Hazard at the University of Massachusetts and Jude Boucher at the University of Connecticut, tested over years in real New England fields. Here is the whole idea, and it is beautiful in its simplicity. Cucumber beetles have a favorite food in all the world, and it is not your cucumbers. It is a big, old-fashioned winter squash called Blue Hubbard. The beetles are drawn to Blue Hubbard far more strongly than to anything else you could plant. So you plant just a few Blue Hubbard plants in a ring around the edge of your cucumber patch, out at the corners, a few feet back, like a circle of decoys standing guard. And what happens is almost too good. The beetles fly in from the field edges, hit that outer ring of Hubbard, pile onto it and stay there, leaving your actual cucumbers in the middle almost untouched. In the real trials, this pulled beetle numbers down by as much as 95% and let growers slash how much they had to spray. Then you simply deal with the beetles concentrated out on those decoy plants. And here is the detail I love. Some New England farmers walk that border with a reverse leaf blower and literally vacuum the beetles right off the Hubbard leaves. A handful of cheap squash seeds around your patch may protect it better than anything you could ever spray into the middle of it. And if the beetles are already here and feeding, you still have 3 more low-cost shields, every one backed by university extension work. The first is kaolin clay, sold as Surround. It is a fine white mineral powder you mix with water and spray on, and it coats the beetle's antennae in a gummy film that leaves it unable to navigate or feed. Penn State and the University of Minnesota both rated among the best organic options there is. Just remember, it does not kill the beetle. It only makes your plant impossible to work with, so put it on early and reapply after rain. The second shield is nearly free. Lay down something reflective under your plants, a strip of aluminum foil or reflective plastic. Cucumber beetles navigate partly by the light of the sky, and that bounced, upward light disorients them and keeps them from settling in. The third is a floating row cover draped over the young plants early, then pulled off the moment the flowers open so the bees can get in. Simple barriers, all of them, and they stop the trouble before it ever starts. Now I want to ask you something, and I truly want your answer down in the comments, because I think it is going to surprise a lot of people. You have heard, probably 100 times, that crop rotation prevents disease. Move your cucumbers to a fresh spot in the garden every year, and you will dodge the sickness. And for 2 of our 4 killers, powdery mildew and bacterial wilt, that is genuinely true, because those overwinter right there in the old vines and the soil, so moving away from them helps. But for one of our 4 killers, crop rotation does absolutely nothing at all. Not one thing. Have you already worked out which one it is? It is downy mildew. Because downy mildew does not live in your soil at all. It blows in on the wind from 1,000 miles away, brand new every year. You could move your cucumber bed to the far side of the moon, and that disease would still find its way to it on the next warm wind. So tell me, honestly, down in the comments, did you know that? And be honest, have you ever dug up and moved a whole bed, sweating over it, hoping to outrun a disease that was never once in your ground to begin with? I want to hear it. The rest of prevention is quieter, but it matters every bit as much. Give your plants real room to breathe, 18 inches to 2 feet apart, and train them up a trellis instead of letting them sprawl across the ground in a damp heap. A vine climbing up into the open air has a breeze moving through it on every side, its leaves dry within minutes of a rain, and disease can barely find a place to take hold. That one change, trellising, prevents more cucumber death than any bottle you can buy. Water at the base, in the morning, always, so the leaves go into the cool of the night bone dry. And do not wait for disease to show up before you spray. Starting a couple of weeks ahead of trouble season, put down your potassium bicarbonate or your 10% milk once a week as a shield. It is far, far easier to keep spores from ever taking hold than to claw back a plant after they have. And next spring, when you are choosing seeds, reach for the varieties the packet or the catalog describes as disease-resistant. Plant breeders have spent years building cucumbers that shrug off both mildews and even tolerate bacterial wilt. A resistant variety, given good spacing and clean watering, can sail straight through the exact late summer stretch that would have flattened an ordinary plant. You are not cheating. You are just starting the season already ahead. So here is your whole rescue in one simple routine. The thing to do no matter which of the 4 you are facing, because in late July, it is very often 2 or 3 of them at once. Number 1, prune the damage and bag it. Give the plant a clean slate to start from. Number 2, open up the center for airflow. And I will say it again because it is the single most underrated move in all of this. Thin that plant so the air moves through it. Number 3, water deep and water at the base only, in the morning, never over the leaves. Number 4, mulch. 3 inches of straw around the base to steady the moisture and the soil temperature and cool those stressed roots. Number 5, feed it, because a drained plant cannot fight off a thing or ripen a single fruit while running on empty, and a balanced organic feed or a good finished compost will do far more for it here than any one clever kitchen scrap. And number 6, guard it in the evening. Go after the beetles and the aphids, and protect your bees while you do. Do those 6 things, and you have handed a dying cucumber plant every single chance it has to come back. And more often than you would ever believe, it does come back. Give it 2 weeks of that care, and the decline stops first. Then the newest little leaves come in clean and green instead of spotted. The vine firms up, and one morning you push the leaves aside and find a young cucumber hanging there that was not there the day before. The plant you had already given up for dead has quietly decided to live. So let me leave you with the one truth that will change how you garden from this day forward. A cucumber plant collapsing in the heat of late July is almost never as finished as it looks. The white coating, the yellowing leaves, the wilting vines, they read like the end of the story. But 9 times out of 10, they are not an ending at all. They are a plant calling out for help in the only language it has. The gardeners who lose their plants are not unlucky, and they are not bad gardeners. They simply did not know what they were looking at, so they gave up a week too soon and pulled a plant that was 2 days from turning the corner. That will not be you anymore. Now you can read it, you can name it, you can treat it, and you can bring it back. So do not pull that plant. Go out there and read it right now, with everything you just learned, and start the rescue today while there is still time on the clock. And then come tell me about it down in the comments. Tell me which growing zone you are in, and which of the 4 is on your plants this very evening. And if you pulled a plant last summer that you now realize you could have saved, tell me that too, honestly, because someone else reading this tonight is about to make the exact same call, and your story might be the thing that stays their hand. If any of this helped you, give it a like, because it pushes this out to the next gardener standing over their fading cucumbers with no idea why. Subscribe and turn on that bell so the next rescue reaches you in time. Now go save your cucumbers. They are waiting on you.